Everybody, let's get started so we don't run too much behind the schedule. This is the first part of a two-panel series on popular violence and its intersection with the state. We have Gema Kloppe-Santamaria, who's joining us from Chicago right now. She's at the University of Loyola, or at Loyola University in Chicago. She's an assistant professor of Latin American history. And we are also joined by Daniel Nkhata, who is an assistant professor or lecturer at the Catholic University of Malawi in the Development Studies Department and a SWAP associate. So we're gonna let Gema start in a second, but before I just wanted to give you news that there are plenty of programs outside, so please feel free to grab as many as you want, so SWAP doesn't end up with a bunch of programs that are not going to be moved. Gema, are you ready to start?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody's gonna have, like, the two presenters are gonna have 20 minutes. Gema, I'll just give you a warning when you have 5 minutes and 1 minute. And then we're going to move into Daniel, and then we'll have like a round of questions as we have been doing. So welcome, Gema, and thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jorge. So first I wanted to thank Arts and Craft for the invitation, as well as to Lucita and Ruleto and everyone that made possible this wonderful colloquium. I am really sorry for not being able to be there in person, but I have enjoyed and learned a great deal from the presentations and the dialogue via this technology. The aim of my presentation is to examine the impact of Mexico's post-state formation in the organization and legitimation of lynching during the country's post-revolutionary period, roughly from the 1930s up to the 1950s. I define lynching as a collective, public, and particularly cruel form of violence aimed at punishing individuals considered offensive or threatening by a given group or community. There are different levels of ritualization and premeditations. Lynchings are ephemeral events that nonetheless reflect long-term inter-community conflicts as well as deep-seated logics of domination and social control. With the notion of state formation, I am referring to the interplay between an emerging authority and communities of people that are incorporated into a larger political association. Neither unilateral nor entirely coercive, the process of state-making is relational, negotiated, and evolving in light of communities' attitudes of compliance or resistance vis-a-vis the state. In order to examine the relation between these two phenomena, I analyzed close to 400 cases of lynching at the national level, drawing from a wide variety of archival materials, including letters of complaint, security reports, judicial proceedings, and periodicals. The systematization of these cases allowed me to identify several modalities of lynching that involve state actors and local authorities, either as victims or as perpetrators of mob violence. Lynching did not always involve state actors. However, those that did involve them allow us to trace more clearly the relationship between state building and lynching in Mexico. Before I proceed with the main arguments of my presentation, I would like to briefly refer to three theoretical and empirical contributions that the overall project, this part of my book manuscript, seeks to offer. The first pertains to the history of this practice in Latin America. Most scholars have construed lynching as a recent phenomenon driven by increasing perceptions of crime and by a context characterized by economic inequality and corrupt or ineffective state institutions. My work acknowledges the relevance of this scholarship, but argues also that prevailing interpretations of lynching have fallen short of elucidating the long-term underpinnings of this practice. In particular, an exclusive focus on the present has precluded scholars from analyzing alternative interpretations concerning the political and cultural motivations of lynching, including the role of state formation, modernization processes, religious practices, and witchcraft beliefs. Secondly, in contrast to scholars who have equated lynching with state absence in Latin America, I argue that lynching were actually triggered by the presence of state authorities that were nonetheless perceived by communities as incapable of providing the type of justice people deemed necessary to punish certain transgressions. More so, I argue that lynching reflected the dynamics of resistance and coercion that characterize citizens' encounters with state authorities at the local level. In this respect, lynchings constituted a means to resist the encroachment of the state within given communities, but it also echoed the use of coercive and extralegal forms of social control perpetrated with the consent and over-participation of public authorities. Thirdly, counter to a perspective that has squarely characterized lynching in Latin America as a weapon of the weak, my work suggests that lynching does not fit easily either into bottom-up or top-down characterizations of violence. Even when perpetrated by people that experience economic depravity, lynchings targeted, for the most part, people considered at the fringes of society, individuals whose beliefs and practices place them outside of the boundaries of what communities deem acceptable or tolerable. Such victims included socialists, communists, Protestants, witches, suspected criminals, and among many others. Conversely, amongst those who supported lynching, we can identify several figures of authorities, from local priests to mayors and police officers, who can be counted amongst the powerful rather than amongst the powerless. Still, lynchings were also perpetrated against some of these very same figures of authority. Police officers, mayors, local power brokers, and even a few military were, at different points of time and with different degrees of intensity, targeted by lynch mobs. In order to make sense of this dual or seemingly contradictory nature of lynching, I propose to examine violence beyond such vertical axis, that is, beyond bottom-up or top-down, and focus instead on the politics and logics of power that shaped and were shaped by lynching within communities themselves. In this sense, I argue that lynchings were overall defensive in character and aimed at preserving communities' dominant values, beliefs, and practices. Being the form of communities' resistance towards the encroachment of the state into local affairs, or citizens' violent responses towards crimes and suspected criminals, lynchings were, by and large, informed by defensive politics in post-revolutionary Mexico. Because most of the paper and also the book manuscript in general is based on thick narratives of several cases of lynching, and for the purposes of my discussion here, I will only stress the theoretical arguments and illustrate with only a few cases. So, in general terms, my paper identifies three modalities of lynching in relation to dynamics of the state building: lynching as resistance, lynching as corrective justice, and state-sanctioned lynching. The first, lynching as resistance, entails the lynching of those state actors that represented the state's efforts to modernize and secularize local communities. In this case, lynching emerges as a means to resist the encroachment of the state into communal life, as well as a means to assert communities' right to decide over matters such as education, religion, sanitation, and land distribution. A clear example of this modality was the series of lynchings perpetrated against federal teachers during the second half of the 1930s. These lynchings were precipitated by the enactment of a new educational policy by the federal government, which dictated that education should promote socialist ideas and the eradication of religious fanaticism. Socialist education was central to Mexico's process of state-making. Through its implementation, elites sought to modernize rural and indigenous communities and integrate them into the national economy via land redistribution and the displacement of traditional authorities such as parish priests and large landowners. Federal teachers meddling into local affairs and their anti-clerical behavior made them subject to collective attacks by neighbors and entire communities. For instance, a male teacher who told his student that he urinated in God was found hanged and castrated hours later with the urinary meatus cut in the state of Durango. In 1935, two female teachers had their ears cut in Jalisco for imparting socialist education. In Veracruz, more than 70 villagers burned one teacher alive and cut the ears of another one. In addition to several teachers, perpetrators of lynching targeted alcohol inspectors, tax collectors, and engineers in charge of promoting agrarian reform. During the 1940s, military conscription and sanitation efforts also provoked the frustration and anger of villagers that perceived these measures as intrusive. In 1942, in Oaxaca, villagers rioted against the military inspector and the municipal recruitment committee and threatened to lynch all of them. Another example, on September of 1947, in Michoacán, hundreds of female and male peasants armed with machetes, stones, and clubs lynched a veterinary doctor and all members of his military escort. The doctor was in charge of a program to eradicate and pull out virus that had infected Mexican cattle. The program, which consisted mostly on the killing of cattle, was violently opposed by peasants who depended on these animals for their economic subsistence.
Gema,
An investigation following the incident established that...
Can you hear me 1 second?
Yeah.
Maybe, could you please slow down a little bit? we're having like some noise outside and it's becoming hard to listen. If you could slow down just a little bit.
So, sorry, what did you say?
If you could slow down a little bit.
Ah, okay, yes, of course.
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for telling me. So an investigation following the incident established that a large group of women and men stabbed the soldiers to death. So this is the first modality of lynching as resistance. Now, the second modality, lynching as corrective justice, corresponds to lynching that target the officials and power figures that were either de jure or de facto responsible for enforcing social control within communities and neighborhoods. These included attacks against police officers, majors, local power brokers that were either lynched because they had abused their authority or because, in the eyes of the community, they had unjustly punished a wrongdoer. In contrast to the previous modality, these lynchings did not reflect communities' rejection of these authorities per se. Rather, they signaled people's discontent towards the behavior of specific officials that had, in their view, abused their power or violated the unwritten rules of acceptable behavior. In this sense, rather than being purely defensive, these lynchings were meant as a corrective of the behavior of these actors. A representative case was the lynching of a police commander, together with 4 more policemen on August of 1943. The police commander had been accused hours earlier of the assassination of 2 young men that belonged to a highly esteemed local family. After learning about the murder, a large group of neighbors armed with pistols and machetes dragged the commander and the 4 policemen out of the police station. The lynch mob killed the commander and proceeded next to mutilate the corpse to the point that it became unrecognizable. The other police officers were also lynched. That citizens could retaliate against police officers' transgressions by using violence against them sheds light on the complex nature of police-society relations. In particular, it shows that citizens were not merely passive observers of police abuse, even when the police had the upper hand in this relationship. And yet, the use of lynching against them shows how citizens managed to circumvent this power dynamic, even if their tactics ended up reproducing the excessive use of violence they allegedly sought to correct in the first place. Now, the third and last modality of lynching, state-sanctioned lynching, refers to lynchings perpetrated by or in conjunction with state authorities, mainly mayors but also soldiers and police officers. These cases entail the collaboration of public officials and citizens who, in the face of an alleged criminal or wrongdoer, consider lynching an appropriate and legitimate form of punishment. The involvement of public officials and representatives of law and order in the organization and execution of these lynchings shows that state officials were far from being the purveyors of a civilizing process, as they themselves sanctioned the use of violence in order to punish suspected criminals. As I have discussed elsewhere, police officers were at times able or willing to save criminals from the lynch mob. However, their selective support of mob violence, together with their regular use of other extralegal means of punishment, including torture and extrajudicial assassinations, demonstrate that they were not foreign to the use of barbarous and uncivilized forms of violence. For instance, on May of 1930, the press reported a triple lynching perpetrated in Puebla. There, 3 men from a neighboring town were wrongly accused of having participated in the robbery of a few chickens that belonged to a local power broker. After being identified by a group of villagers, the men were beaten and dragged to the municipal offices. Once there, the mayor and the local judge summoned a large group of villagers and, in the presence of a growing crowd, gave the order of hanging the men from a tree. The crowd completed the lynching armed with pistols, stones, and knives. Similarly, on February 1940, also in Puebla, a man called Simon Garcia was lynched with the complicity of and direct participation of local authorities. In a letter addressed to the president, Simon's widow and sister denounced the mayors for having instigated the lynching in retaliation for an old land dispute. After calling him into his office, the mayor, together with a group of men, turned Simon over to a crowd of more than 30 people who were waiting for him outside of the municipal offices, armed with clubs, machetes, and daggers. Taken together, these 3 modalities of lynching allow us to make 2 general arguments about the impact of Mexico's process of state building on lynching. First, these modalities show that the encroachment of the post-revolutionary state into communal life, together with the behavior of public officials that were considered abusive or intrusive, contributed to the occurrence of lynching. In this sense, counter to what classic sociological theories would predict, the greater presence of state authorities at the local level did not bring about a decrease in extralegal, overt, and public forms of violence, such as lynching. Rather, it was conducive to its incidence, as well as to its legitimation in the eyes of perpetrators who perceived state authorities as intrusive or unfair. Secondly, these modalities, particularly the third one, highlight the fact that mob violence was not averted by public officials, but was actually promoted as a form of governance and social control. Surely, central elites were quick to dismiss the violence promoted by mayors and municipal police officers as another sign of the backwardness of rural communities. However, rather than reflecting communities' so-called atavistic traditions, these instances of mob violence were symptomatic of the ways in which state authority was forged at the local level with the acquiescence of state and federal elites. In sum, the third modality of lynching shows that a dichotomous narrative of state formation, where the state stands for modernity and communities for barbarity, a narrative that was present in both media and public official discourses, is historically inaccurate and ultimately wrong. The history of lynching presented by this paper is not circumscribed to the history of revolutionary Mexico. The processes of scapegoating, exclusion, and violence this paper has narrated are shaped by different countries and have been present in different periods of time. In addition to the United States and Latin America, lynchings have been documented and examined in countries as different as South Africa, India, and Indonesia. On the other hand, the history of lynching offered here is indeed one that reflects the particularities of Mexico's post-revolutionary period. Lynchings not only reflected on the dynamics of coercion, negotiation, and resistance that shaped the country's process of state building during these decades, but also the ways in which contemporaries' conceptions of religion, crime, politics, and witchcraft shaped the acceptability of violence. And I should say, I don't have a chance here, but one full chapter of my book deals with witchcraft and specifically with bloodsucking witches. So I'm looking forward to the next presentation.
5 minutes.
Mob killing also, I'm concluding. Mob killings also bring to the fore communities' reactions to modernization and centralization efforts at the same time that they reveal the uncivilized and violent behaviors that state actors embodied and generated. Today, as in the past, lynchings have been rationalized as a necessary means to punish those others that threaten to undermine citizens' sense of security. In Mexico, Guatemala, Argentina, Brazil, the Philippines, among other countries, the criminal, the gang member, the drug trafficker have been construed as those outsiders against which, paraphrasing, society must be defended. In this defense of society, not only the state, but also citizens and communities have helped defend the seeming vortex of violence impacting Latin America today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gema. She was presenting a paper Between Civilization and Barbarity, Lynching and State Formation in Mexico, which I forgot to mention at the beginning of her presentation. We now have Daniel Nkhata, who's going to be presenting the paper The Occult and Resistance to Symbolic Extraction, Bloodsucker Killings in Rural Malawi.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Nkhata, and as you can see, my work is on the occult and resistance to extraction, bloodsucker killings in rural Malawi. This is work that is coming from some of the findings I had in my MA research report, which I just submitted. So I did this research in July last year, which is 2018. I had a lot of data from the field, but because I was dealing with university deadlines. This data which I analyzed, about 50% of what I collected to answer the questions I had. I still have that again and analyzed, which I'm still analyzing at the moment for other projects. So these are some findings, but between last year and now, from the data that I've analyzed and is outside this presentation, I'm still being challenged by what I'm finding, challenging some of the things I'll talk about, but also illuminating some of the things I'll also raise in my presentation. So my presentation will answer a couple of questions. I want to talk about what happened on the issues of the occurrences of bloodsuckers, but also protests in Malawi in 2016 to 2018. I will also talk about the suspects, but also the targets. The suspects or the targets of bloodsucking, the people that were attacked by communities suspected to be bloodsuckers. Then I'll also talk about violence as resistance to this extractive industry, but also extractive relationships that exist in our society, especially in this community that I'm dealing with. Then I'll also talk about other dimensions of violence which are outside my arguments on extraction. Then there are some unanswered questions which I'll just highlight, but I'm going to talk about them. For you to understand my presentation, I'll take you back to what Aninka said was that yesterday when she was responding to a question raised by Kifue about what communities are doing in areas where extractive industries are booming, but also dispossessing those communities. There's ecological violence. She started to answer that question. I'll also talk about those issues on how communities in Moranje have responded to the extractive industry, but also some extractive activities, but also some symbolic extractive relationships in their communities. Now, my study was done in Malawi. This is Malawi, that's Mozambique, that's Zambia, Tanzania, the other side, and this is Zimbabwe. My study was done somewhere here, bordering Mozambique. There are a lot of issues I'm also finding out now in the data I'm looking at on how stories or rumors started from Mozambique, crossed into Malawi, and different patterns of violence. But I think that's what I'll do later on to talk about how violence, the other side, also changed dynamics of violence in Malawi. This is the map of southern Malawi. Moranje is here. This is the area where I did my study. I dealt with about 12 to 13 villages. That's where I did my interviews in Moranje and bordering Harombe district. Now, some few issues about the community I was dealing with. Moranje is a rural community in southern Malawi. Predominantly, the community is involved in tea growing. They have a lot of tea plantations. I think Malawi is the second or third tea producer, biggest tea producer in Africa, but mostly because of this district, Moranje district. They also have the Moranje Massif, which is Moranje Mountain. It is a sacred mountain to communities in this area because they have shrines up the mountain, but they also mountain is also home to a huge biodiversity, which has been under attack, and I'll talk about those issues as I present. Just behind the mountain, they discovered some rare earth minerals around 2012, and the government issued out some contracts, which they've started to explore. They started to explore around 2013, and most of these, the protests I'm dealing with started in 2014, soon after the signing of those contracts. But also, it's important for you to note that our current president is coming from the same district. His late brother was also president from 2004 to 2012, was also coming from the same district. This is important because most people in Malawi think this district is mostly favored when accessing development projects or development programs from the government, but the case is different on the ground. The case is different on the ground, and that also filters into the issues I'll discuss on how communities responded to those issues. For 2019, they're talking about 762,000 people in that area, and 100,000 are directly or indirectly employed or linked to the tea plantations. Now, coming to the issue of bloodsucker occurrences, rumors, and the protests that emerged in 2016 to 2018. Before I talk about these things, I want to talk about what happened in 2000 and 2002, but also 2009, because this wasn't the first time these things happened. In 2000, rumors came in the same community, not the same community, but they happened in the urban areas in Zuzu, in Lironga, our capital city, but also in Blantyre. Rumors moved so quickly. There were some sparks of protest, but they were easily contained by the government. They all happened in the urban areas, in the cities. Communities were under panic, they were under fear, but they didn't do anything. Most communities did not react to all these issues. And the state easily managed these rumors, and most of these rumors maybe stayed for about 3 to 4 weeks. They vanished from the public space. In 2016 to 2018, they came back. They came back and brought in new dimensions, which gave me some interest to look at what was happening in Morambi, because when they happened in 2016 to 2018, they happened in a rural setup. They happened in Morambi, not in the city. But again, there was a lot of violence involved between 2016 and 2018. So mostly, this violence started when communities were meeting. They had meetings outside the churches, in schools. They met in their villages to talk about people being sacked. So they had cases of people who had been sacked by bloodsuckers. The government was involved. They came into the community to tell the people. They sent doctors to tell the people that no, this does not exist. Stop it. This is madness, etc., etc. But the rumors continued, and these occurrences continued. People kept on coming forward to say, no, we've been sacked. We've got victims. And from those meetings, apart from expressing fear and anxiety, they started to march, because the state was saying, no, this does not exist. So media started to organize and to march to local government offices in Morambi. These are villagers now walking to local government officers saying, no, 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 these things are happening, why you deny? But something interesting happened when they were doing all this, because instead of carrying placards that were dealing with issues of blood sucking, communities were carrying placards to deal with unemployment, talking about insecurity, talking about politicians, talking about several other issues to do with service provision, but also relations within those communities. They had more than 20 marches across 6 villages in the 2 years. More than 20 marches happened from different villages going to the local government offices. But also, it was interesting during these protests because they were mostly done during the day. So almost everybody was involved, marching to the local government office or the district office. But at night, from the same narrative of bloodsuckers, things started to happen at night. So young people started to attack bloodsuckers. So we had more than 20 people being victims of this, being killed, being suspected as bloodsuckers. So the other interesting thing about what was happening was that mostly during the day, women were the ones who identified, who talked about the bloodsuckers. Okay, they suspected who was a bloodsucker, they defined who was a bloodsucker, and young people acted on that information during the night to attack those particular figures, to attack those particular people. Okay, so it was during the day, protesting, marching to government offices. At night, attacks were happening. Now, for me to understand what was happening, I had to ask questions, but also go into the community and understand these bloodsuckers. But I couldn't understand these bloodsuckers by just asking communities. I had to go and look at the biographies or the backgrounds of the suspects or the victims, especially those that escaped the attacks, or the names of people who were attacked and died out of these attacks. Now, this was so important because most suspects did not die after being sacked. So they still came on TV, they came on the radios, stories were written about them that so-so has been sacked. Communities had examples of people, they had witnesses, and we were parading these witnesses, that this one has been sacked, my wife has been sacked, my daughter has been sacked, etc., etc. But without dying, then the question was, this sacking extraction we're talking about meant something other than the physical removal of blood, which is a very vital fluid. Okay, so mostly what we know is that if you're sacked, from stories of vampires, you have to die. But most of them did not die. Actually, they didn't record any death from this. So my question was, what extraction are we talking about? Okay, that's why I had to go and look at the people that were being attacked by communities at night. Then from that, I raised a number of arguments. Number one, I said blood sucking is a symbolic reference to multiple processes and modes of extraction that are happening in this community. These modes of extraction represent the concrete extractive industries, so mining, for example, but also drilling activities, which I'll talk about later on, but also extractive relationships, which I'll also highlight in this presentation. Then I also, in my work, highlighted that the violence that emerged from these rumors, from these occurrences, was actually violence that was eliminating agents or sources of this extraction. Sources and agents of this extraction, which I'm calling resistance in this case, resistance to extraction. But beyond my argument on resistance to extraction, I'm also saying that there's another dimension of violence that was happening in this community, which reflected community fractures, because several other groups took advantage of the space of this violence, which was targeting the so-called bloodsuckers for particular individuals or groups to meet their own interests in the community. Now, the first bloodsucker I will talk about are the engineers. The engineers from the water drilling program or project. It's an 18 billion kwacha water drilling project. I don't know how much that is in rands or in dollars. Which started around 2013. Land High Water Board is tapping water from Muranyi Mountain or the Muranyi Massif, which I just showed you, transporting that water to Blantyre City. Now, the newspaper I have there is talking about the project starting amid threats from communities. And these threats were what I'll talk about, because when these engineers were being attacked, communities raised a number of things. So for example, unfortunately my PowerPoint is not showing some of the quotes. I have quotes on my sorry. So for example, when I did interview in this community, some people are saying, you know what, they are extracting our souls. Our ancestors live in that mountain. This is a female respondent in this community, talking about why some of these engineers working on this project were attacked. But also, but also, they're saying you cannot separate, this is a chief now, he says you cannot separate the bodies of women from, from that mountain, because this mountain is sacred, but also in this particular community, which is a matrilineal community, women derive their names, apart from the maiden name they're given, they also derive their names from this mountain. So every woman has got her maiden name and a particular name given by the family, but mostly that name is coming from that mountain. So this extraction or this dealing project is actually directly linked to the borders of women in this community. And that also, this narrative got into the bloodsucker killings. Then there is this uranium project or plant, Kairekera, up north, not in the south. Here in the south, the community was dealing with, we're just exploring the presence of some rare earth minerals at this point. So people in this community were saying, you see what has happened to people in the north, because this plant is now, it only worked for 7 years and they dumped it. The people that were operating, they dumped it and they destroyed the community there. And these people are saying, you know, these people just come to your community, suck your resources and dump it in your faces. And we don't want this to happen here. So they also attacked engineers from this mining project. And most of the victims were coming from this mining project. 2 other groups of people were attacked. So journalists, BBC journalists, but also journalists from our country were also attacked by communities. And I've got a quote there where someone, a retired teacher, is saying, these journalists just extract stories and trade for money, our pain and misery in their papers. And I'm talking about vampire journalism, where journalists go to communities, extract stories, and it becomes a big issue, and they sell their names or their papers out of those stories. And these communities were protesting all those issues. This is representing an extractive relationship between journalism and these rural communities. But also, I'm also arguing that the picture we have down there, this picture, these are tea pluckers. There are a lot of people working on tea plantations. And most of them, from the interviews I had, were talking about how, I think this is common, workers talking about how they sweat their blood on the plantations and how their blood propels machines on the tea plantations. Okay, and this is being linked directly to the attacks these people were making on tea plantation managers. So apart from the engineers, they also attack tea plantation managers, but also journalists. These are issues of precarious work. But for this community, my paper is also talking about having a precarious community beyond work. Now, beyond the narrative of these extractive issues, violence was also appropriated in different ways by communities in this community, by people in this community. So for example, violence was also used to eliminate competitors, business competitors, or chieftaincy issues also got into the bloodsucker narrative, where people took advantage of the space of this violence to begin to eliminate competitors. It was not linked to those extractive issues. But again, because of the fear and the issues that were happening in this community, the youth were given jobs by the community to patrol at night, to protect communities from these bloodsuckers. The youth, which are mostly unemployed in this case, discovered that this night patrolling job is actually lucrative because they're being paid. So what they also did was to sustain the fear of communities by hunting their own bloodsuckers and spreading those rumors in the morning that we attacked or we found 2-3 other bloodsuckers at night. Just sustain community fear and continue making money from the trade. It became a trade to the young people. But also, Pentecostal pastors. So there's a story of a Pentecostal pastor whom actually approached a young person who was doing business in the community and told that young person that you have to join my church. I want you to join my church and participate in my church because the young man had money. Then the boy said no. Then the pastor said, if you don't do this, you see what will happen to you. After about some few weeks, a woman from the same church of this pastor professed in the church that she had a dream that this young man was also involved in blood-sucking business. The community also attacked this young man. But the pastor was basically pursuing his own, I think from what Ovia said in the morning, his own ambitions. Then there was also negation of humanity where people were saying, no, we can't talk about violence and bloodsuckers. These are not, these are supernatural things. We are killing supernatural. You can't talk about violence and supernatural beings. Violence is about people, not supernatural beings. So there was negation of humanity. But two chiefs, traditional chiefs were killed from this because communities said they were shooting bloodsuckers. Because of time, I'll quickly go through this. Violence was also used as an alternative trial. So most people said in these communities,
we have to kill these people because if they go to court, if we catch them and they go to the chiefs, they'll be forgiven, they'll be on bail. So communities were using this violence as authentic trial. But there are also issues coming out about work itself, the nature of work. Now, this was a narrative coming from old people, 40, 50, above, targeting young men and saying, most young men are making soft money from soft work. They're not working hard, because most of these guys, old people, derive their livelihoods from agriculture, and they had to sweat. They spent years and years before building a house. And most of these young people are involved in these soft businesses, dealing in loans, insurance, airtime, and they've built houses at a very young age. And most of the old people are saying, most of these young people being attacked are making money from soft work. So these are also contestations around meanings of work. As I said, there's still data I'm analyzing. There are still issues which I still have to look at. So for example, as you can see, there's a huge gender dimension of bloodsucker organisms and the violence that happened. But I didn't pursue this in detail, which is work I'll do later on. But also, I want to talk about Ruma versus technologies of violence, comparing Mozambique and Malawi, but also the political intersections of the bloodsucker violence. And finally, I want to talk about the analysis of news framing, especially by the media, on bloodsucker occurrences and the violence, the subsequent violence that happened during this time. Thank you so much. I should stop there.
Thank you, Daniel and Gema. We're going to open the floor for questions. I think we have, well, according to the schedule, we have 10 minutes, but we can go a little bit farther, right? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so is Gema going to come back to the video? So let's have a round of 2-3 questions first, and then see if there are more. Anybody? Garth? And then...
My question is really to you, and of course this is not a new question. You and I have had this conversation before, but it's really the extent to which you can make the claim that this is resistance. How far you can push the claim that this is resistance, or whether this is a mode of meaning making that communities are deploying as a way of understanding extractive industries inside the particular community. So I mean, it's really a question about whether you can actually, the degree of continuity that you can make in your argument about the use or the appropriation of certain anthropological features that may come from within Africa, that may come from outside of Africa, and the way that gets deployed in the moment, whether that can absolutely be claimed as resistance, or whether it's more of a meaning-making structure for communities.
Thank you for your presentations. My question is for Daniel. I just wanted to find out, since in your presentation you were talking about how these community members in this rural village have this perception of journalists as people who are also actively extracting information from them and leaving them in the lurch. I just wanted you to comment on your methodological processes and how you dealt with whatever perceptions they had of you as a researcher during the interview process, because you were technically also getting information from them, and how did you deal with that?
Do you have another question back there?
Thanks for those presentations. My question is for the first presentation on lynching. So I think much of the scholarship on lynching is North American based from the American South. And I wondered if the character of the lynchings in Mexico are have a similar logic. So the people who, it was African Americans in the South, and if there's any, so the people who were lynched, are they, for example, the poorest people? And I know that you spoke about mayors and significant people also facing this, but which is interesting because I always imagined it to be people in the lowest social strata of society who, because there's something about a humanity that is questioned in a lynching, whose work, whose body, whose livelihood is, whose life is worth keeping and whose is worth death. So yeah.
Right. So, do you want to go first, Hannah?
So I think the question correctly, something about describing a little bit more the social aspect of so therefore, I think so in general most of the lynching were considered the margins of society. They were most of them, for instance, those that were involved in criminal activities, they were poor people themselves. The lynching of witches, for instance, also reflects like some people that were, like basically like in the margins of society, or people that were not at the center of power. So the challenge, though, is, as I mentioned, especially in this chapter of the book that deals with state building, is that some of these victims were also local figures, majors, police officers, few cases of military, the federal level. And that's why I believe that it kind of challenges the notion that all of these lynchings were necessarily directed against the powerful, because they were both. They were directed against the powerless and against the powerful. But in both cases, what I like to highlight is the issue of lynching being a form of social control, which is not a new finding. Sociologists have said this for a long time, and especially in the context of the history of lynching in the United States. But somehow in the Latin American literature, the question of lynching as social control has somehow been obscured by a logic or by a narrative that says that these are weapons of the weak. And I like to emphasize this because understanding lynching as social control allows us to see how these people were excluded in a violent way, and they were excluded in a violent way because they did not represent the values that were considered as, they did not represent the dominant values of society. They didn't represent, in this case of post-revolutionary Mexico, the Catholic, law-abiding ways in which communities understood themselves. So I hope I answered a little bit of that. And even if the question of witchcraft was not directed to me, I would just like to just quickly say that in the case of post-revolutionary Mexico, you see also attacks against people accused of blood-sucking or fat stealing in the context of modernization processes and people trying to make sense in a way, as was said before, make sense of these interventions. And so you see these rumors circulating about blood-sucking and fat stealing, especially fat of children, in the context of the introduction of modern machinery, the construction of breaches, and the intervention of engineers that are trying to construct public works. So it's an interesting, like point of conversation with the presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth and Shido, for the questions. I'll start with Shido on the issue of journalism, but also my role as a researcher and the risk of being understood in the same framework of a bloodsucker or a vampire, just like journalists were understood by these communities. I think, as I said earlier on, I spent about 3 to 4 weeks in this community, but this was not the first time I went to that community. my research started, I went to Malawi I think that was in April, May, for a 1-week field visit. There was a function and a sacrifice offering function by the chiefs and communities there. So I went there to participate in that, and I had lots of discussions with the chiefs during that initial meeting to book appointments, but also talk about my work and the issues I wanted to deal with. After that, I went back in July for data collection, but before going there, I had serious issues with the ethics committee. They were also asking the same questions. But because I had an uncle living in the same community, number one, but also I'm a local boy coming from almost the same area. Again, I was asked to make commitments that after my work, I would come back and report to the community, which I agreed to. So these results, I had to present my results based on the agreement I made with the police commissioner there for the southern region, but also the chiefs had to go back and communicate. So because of these commitments and the rapport I had with most structures in the community, but also people in the community, there was a way I used to still be one of them and hear all these stories in the 4 weeks. I think I've got a full chapter on methodology that is also dealing with a lot of issues I experienced in the field. And one of the important issues I should raise here is that my cab driver, or back home we call them taxi, this side taxi, meter taxi is a minibus. So my cab driver, when I was discussing with him during one of the visits in the field, that I'm finding it difficult we're just chatting, and he was asking me about how information was coming. So I said, I still have issues with talking to women, but also some people in the community, they're not opening up. So he suggested that I should use community anonymous boxes for my research. So we also used community anonymous boxes. We planted them at the schools where I was doing my study, and after talking to people, I told them you can actually write your stories or letters and drop them in those boxes to add on what you said already, or if there's something you don't want to attach your face to, that I shouldn't even see you. So I also had these anonymous letters which I used as part of the data collection process. So there are several things we did in the community which actually negated the risk which you've just raised in terms of me being understood or being framed within the same framework of bloodsuckers like journalists. However, there could still be a possibility that I could go back if my results go out to the media and the particular ways I frame what people said in that community. The chances are high if I go back there, or some people go back there to do something around bloodsuckers, they could be attacked, because it's an issue of trust between those communities and the people that go and work with them. Coming to Garth, by the way, Garth was my supervisor in car. So if your supervisor is still asking such questions, it means you're still not convinced. So I think, as I've always said, I think this is, from my paper, it's actually, I could say, still both frameworks through which communities are trying to understand precarity, but also things happening around them, but also because I was mostly targeting issues of violence. That's where I was using the stories to talk about how they were resisting the coming in of these extractive structures such as mining, water drilling at the mountain, but also issues to do with journalism. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? There's one over there, and this one, and
Interesting presentation. one relates to the language we are using, bloodsucker. I'm just not sure if the equivalence in Chewa is Chewa.
Yes.
Yes. Does it translate to bloodsucker? Or maybe it means something else? I mean, I'm really asking this question because I know in Zimbabwe with similar kinds of situations for witch hunting, which was led by a group of people called the Kamtandas. Something similar. And I would translate it to bloodsuckers and so forth, to get a different meaning. So it's just about the grammar that we are using. I'm just seeking clarity there. The second question is to do with the issue of inequality. It appears to me that that language, those accusations of bloodsucking and so forth might reflect a broader social issue, particularly relating to inequality. We know that anthropologically speaking, sometimes to accuse somebody of bloodsucking and so forth is the function of actually, promoting some kind of social leveling. If you attack a journalist who is coming from the city, there's some kind of social leveling that takes place there. Even within the context of families, when somebody becomes richer than everybody else, of course the accusation also sticks that you are sucking blood. And sometimes you get attacked there, some people get killed by family members. So maybe I want you to explain a bit on the family dimension side. And even, you mentioned politicians as well, so that is my interest.
All right, thank you so much. Do you have a question here, Ramani? Could you pass the mic here, please?
Yeah, I have two factual questions actually. And the first one was already asked, is that the language in which, the meaning in the language that is spoken in that region. Gema also spontaneously used witchcraft to refer to this phenomenon. So I was wondering if which word they actually use there, and also if it is really blood-sucking, and since you refer also to vampirism and vampire, are they also being influenced by outside cultural law, maybe? This notion of the vampire that is coming from mostly Europe, I would say. And the other question maybe would help you also respond to what Garth is saying. Is this also happening in other areas of Malawi where you do not have this extractive industry and this kind of political economy of extraction going on? Do you have this phenomenon of bloodsucking?
Right. Thank you. And Carl?
Yes, I've got a question for Gema, which is the processes you're describing of lynching as resistance to the state and lynching as corrective to the operations of state officials. I'm wondering whether this could be taken to be simply a transitional process as the state is establishing itself in those areas, in that process of state formation, and something that has disappeared since, or does it still take some kind of form? Is it an ongoing process, or is it a specific transitional form?
Gema, let's let you respond first. We lost your image for some reason. We cannot see you right now. You're back. Yeah, you're back. Okay, so let you respond to this first, and then we'll let Daniel close it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the question. So regarding the last question, I'll start with what Carl asked. So what I identify is actually two different historical trajectories of both of these modalities of lynching. In the case of lynching as resistance, as you were mentioning, there is actually a decrease in this kind of lynchings against state actors that represented the quote-unquote modernizing forces of the state. And I explained in the book manuscript that this is a result of the process of accommodation and negotiation, and in a way, the fact that the state was able to gain greater legitimacy within these communities. I mean, there was a process by which the harsh anti-clerical measures of the state were tamed by the post-revolutionary state. They recognized that Catholicism was an important force in local activity, and therefore they eliminated the socialist education. They created a more amicable relationship with the church, with local power brokers. So this kind of is actually decreased by the end of the 1950s, there's basically none of this can be seen anymore. So indeed there was you can see there the process of state making, as I described it at the beginning, as this process of negotiation that results in a different kind of order. Now, interestingly enough, the lynchings that I described as corrective, those that were perpetrated against police officers for the most part, but also against majors and others in charge of exercising social control, they continue to occur with frequency in Mexico. And you can see them today. I mean, this is one of the, like some of the most important and really the cases that have attracted lots of media coverage involve the victimization of police officers. There was a very famous case in 2004 where 3 police officers were lynched, and the lynching was broadcasted live by Televisa, like the biggest TV company in Mexico. And I explain this as a result precisely of the state's failure to legitimate its social control over people. I mean, the people do not see the state capacity to punish as being legitimate, as being capable, or as providing the type of justice that people want to get done. So the continuity of these lynchings as corrective justice demonstrates the failure of the state to legitimate its presence within these communities. And this was throughout the 20th century to the present. Now, in terms of the first question, if I understood correctly, was a question about terms and about words. So in Mexico, the word that is used for describing lynching is the Spanish word for it, linchamiento. I traced the origins of the term back to the 1890s, more or less. This coincides with the greater attention that Mexico had, or the greater awareness that Mexico had about lynchings taking place in the United States. Clearly, linchamiento is an adoption from the English word directly. Actually, the spelling up to the 1940s follows the English spelling. It's spelled with a Y, and then later on it changes to an I, which is the proper Spanish spelling. So you can see, I mean, in a different project, I traced the ways in which clearly the history of lynching in Mexico and also Latin America at large is influenced by the knowledge that exists about this practice in the United States, and it has a great, like cultural impact in terms of how to envision this practice as a form of justice. Even though in Latin America the question of racial white domination is not present. And then the press, I mean, the sources that I analyzed, including periodicals, refer to these cases as linchamientos independently of the fact that they are criticizing or they are supporting them. The press was more the press tended to accept more those lynchings against criminals, but those lynchings that were against state actors or people, in charge of secularizing communities, they were described as barbaric and uncivilized. But regardless of the politics of this representation, in both cases, the term that was used was linchamiento.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Obvious and Ramani, for the questions. So I'll start with the issue of terminology, bloodsuckers. So now, if you find a person like me in Blantyre City, in Minongo City, and I want to discuss what's happening in Mulanje, mostly the people you meet in the cities will talk about Anamapopa, suckers. Okay? If you go to Mulanje, where these issues were happening, they talk about Opopamakas. Opopamakas, which is bloodsucker. If you check the media is talking about vampires. Then there's also a lot of literature. You can go to Louise White, who did a lot of work in East Africa, talking about histories of colonialism and how people understood that. She's talking about vampires and rumor. The difference in all this is that for people in Mulanje, it's directly linked to bloodsucker. For them, they're talking about bloodsuckers. Of course, we've got all these movie houses in rural areas nowadays. It could happen they're also watching vampire movies in those communities. But their difference, if you look at the figures they're targeting, there's a particular figure they're looking at, which directly takes us to issues of inequality, as obviously said. It has always been there in most of these rural communities. So you go to, I gave you a picture of the Kairekera uranium plant in Karonga. Issues of inequality there are high. They're also mining there, but these things didn't happen in that community. So there's something unique about this Morangi area that invited me to go and look at these issues there, because these occurrences and how people are reacting to them were only happening there in that community. Of course, we also had rumor traveling with social media, with media. Rumor traveled across the country. Some people in other rural areas also said, I think this one has also been sacked, that one has also been sacked. But the violence and the velocity of what was happening was so high and different in this community, in Morangi district. So the politics around language and how it was used in this case, vampires, bloodsuckers, maybe is also an issue, as I've said, for the way which I said, I need to also investigate or interrogate on how the media frames in the news, all these issues. I think that's an area I can also interrogate in my future work. Then going to, I think I've talked about inequality. Yeah, I think I should stop. Hopefully I've answered the two questions. Yeah, but maybe just to say that this is so different from witchcraft killings. Witch killings, because we have witches in Malawi. People believe all these things. They're also killed once in a while. You hear a witch has been killed in Morangi, but this is different because you have two cases of suspected witches being killed maybe in 2 years, 3 years. But this happened in 2 years, 2 consecutive years, and these were serious issues with protests involved. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gema, again, and Daniel. Let's give them both a round of applause. Gema was up since 4 a.m. in the morning from Chicago, so she deserved those applause. Let's meet again in 5 minutes. So.